Welcome back to the Edo Lady Traveler's Guide. I'm your Edo Storyteller. In our last episode, we uncovered how Tokugawa Ieyasu and the warlords before him transformed muddy dirt paths into a high-speed military internet, establishing the Gokaido, or the Five Routes, and the famous Tenma system, or relay horses network. The roads are beautifully paved, and the post station are officially set up. It feels like we can finally put our tired feet up, hire an Edo-taxi, and enjoy a romantic ride, right? Well, not so fast. Today, we are going to dive into the gritty reality behind these bustling post towns. We'll uncover who was actually paying the heavy blood tax to keep these horses fed, and revealed what it was really like for a female traveler to ride the so-called Edo-taxi. Spoiler alert, it was terrifying. But the bumpy horse ride is just a beginning of our journey today, because once you get off that horse, you will come face to face with the absolute biggest nightmare for any woman traveling in the Edo period, the Sekisho, the heavy guarded border checkpoint. Why was the shogunate so completely paranoid about women leaving the city? Tighten your straw sandals and hold on to your travel permits, because things are about to get intense. Let's hit the road. Since it was for the shogunate's official needs, who fed these horses and people, this is where it gets cruel. The Tenma system was like a massive relay race. Later, all cargo left Edo, were unloaded at the first station, and a completely different set of horses and men were swapped in to deliver them to the next station. To keep this relay running, the shogunate ordered that the villagers at each post station must keep a specific number of horses, usually 36 to 100, and the laborers on standby at all times. One horse had to be paired with one person, so when you rented a horseman usually accompanied it to prevent the horse from being stolen. For the local residents, this was actually a brutally heavy tax. It didn't matter if it was a harvest season or New Year's. As long as an official gave the order, you had to provide people and horses to help them move or deliver mail. And usually the pay was incredibly low and even non existent, because this was considered an obligation. So, while we look back at these historic post towns and think they are full of romantic atmosphere, to the residents at the time, they were a heavy burden full of sweat, tears, and helplessness. Alright, enough heavy historical background. Let's get back to you, a female traveler who just wants to be a little lazy. While these horses were mainly for officials, if there were spare horses lying around, commoners could actually pay to rent them. This was the taxi of the Edo period. But do not, for a second, think this was a comfortable ride. First of all, the native Japanese horses at that time didn't look like the tall British race horses you see today. They had short legs and chubby bellies. They had great stamina, but couldn't run fast. Second, you usually didn't ride directly on the horse's back. A wooden frame-like saddle would be placed on the horse, and then both sides would be hung with luggage, maybe giant bags of rice or barrels of soy sauce. And then you were sitting on the very top of that cargo pile. Imagine this. You are sitting nearly 2 meters in the air on a pile of cargo, and your center of gravity is completely off. The horseman leads the horse over a bumpy, rocky road, and every time the horse sways, you feel like you are going to be violently thrown off at any moment. So many women wrote in their diaries, "It scared me to death," or "My butt hurt so badly," unless their feet were injured and they literally couldn't walk. Most female travelers would rather just use their own 2 feet than spend money to suffer like that. That being said, renting a horse wasn't entirely devoid of joy. The men who led the horses were called mago, which means the horseman. In Edo literature, the image of this horseman is usually very distinct. They had dark skin, dressed minimally, often half naked, and had bold, rugged personalities. To pass the boring time, the horsemen were usually great singers, belting out beautiful folk tunes known as Mago Uta, which means the horseman's songs. This colorful cast of character turned the post stations into more than just places to sleep. They became vibrant intelligence hubs where samurai, merchants, horsemen, and courtesans all cross paths. It is precisely because Tokugawa Ieyasu built this system in 1601 that we had the flourishing travel scenes we see later in history. We have horses, we have rest stops, and it feels like we can happily hit the road. Now, I want you to imagine that you are following a tour group and have arrived at the famous Hakone or Alai. From the distance, you see massive wooden barricades ahead. Standing next to them are several fierce-looking officials with katana swords on their waists and satsumata, which means a Japanese man-catcher pole weapon, in their hands. The atmosphere in your group suddenly becomes incredibly heavy. The man walking in front of you takes off his bamboo hat, bows, shows his ID to the official for a split second, and passes through in less than 3 seconds. But when it's your turn, as a woman, the official's eyes instantly turn sharp. He points to a dark little room off to the side and says coldly, "Get in, the crown is waiting for you." This is the biggest nightmare for female travelers in the Edo period, the Sekisho, or checkpoint. This wasn't a normal inspection station. It was a psychological battle where your life and dignity were on the line. Why was the shogunate so strict with women? Behind this is a famous slogan: "No guns in, no women out." What does this mean? No guns in meant the shogunate was terrified of someone smuggling weapons into Edo to launch a coup. So weapons entering the city were strictly inspected. No women out meant the shogunate was afraid that women kept as hostages would escape Edo. Strictly inspection guns going in, strictly forbidding women going out. This is tied to the Edo shogunate's Sankin-kotai, alternate attendance system. Here we need to briefly introduce this system. To prevent rebellions, the shogunate kept the wives and the children of all the daimyo, which means feudal lords across Japan in Edo, as hostages. Although officially it was to let their families enjoy life in Edo, in reality it was a massive invisible prison. The Sankin-kotai system wasn't invented by the Tokugawa shogunate. It had existed much earlier. Its origins can be traced back to Japan's Middle Age and are closely related to the Edo period's Shonin-sei, which means hostage system. In 1586, Toyotomi Hideyoshi handed over his own biological mother to Tokugawa Ieyasu as a hostage to get Ieyasu to visit Kyoto and pay his respects. This event influenced later daimyo to also travel to Osaka for attendance. Another famous incident occurred in 1600 when Maeda Toshinaga, the lord of Kaga domain, voluntarily sent his mother Hoshunin to Edo as a hostage to show his loyalty. One school of thought considers this event the origin of the hostage system. In 1635, the shogunate officially established the Sankin-kotai system in the Bukkei Shohato, which means laws for military houses, issued in June. It clearly stipulated that daimyo must perform alternate attendance every April. From then on, daimyo weddings were held in Edo, and they could not take their wives back to their domains, strictly controlling the passage of women between territories. The wives had to settle in Edo and could not return to their hometowns. They were forced to live in Edo. Regarding subsequent laws related to women, the Shoin-sei hostage system was abolished during the Kanbun era, 1661 to 1673, and the control over the wives of daimyo softened somewhat. Later, the proposal of the Sankin-kotai relaxation edict was a profoundly impactful policy for women. After this edict was proposed in 1862, the wives of daimyo could return to live in their own domains. This sounds like a wonderful thing, finally being able to return to their territories and stay by their husbands' sides. But that wasn't the case. For generations of wives who had lived in Edo for nearly 230 years, from the wives who had tearfully bid their husbands farewell to move to Edo, to the daughters who grew up there and were entirely used to Edo life only to become another lord's wife and continually living there, it is hard to imagine how they felt when told to move back to the domains. Shu Xingyin explicitly wrote her thoughts in historical records. I'm 64 years old now and have never left Edo since the day I was born. But now they want me to go to Nobeoka. Just thinking about such a long journey makes me feel awful. Although Sankin-kotai was primarily a political movement of the samurai class, this system and the transportation infrastructure it spurred, such as post stations, road maintenance, allowed Edo-era tourists, including women, to use these facilities for travel. So, if a checkpoint led a woman slip away, in the eyes of Shogunate, it wasn't just one person missing. It meant a hostage has escaped. Someone is going to rebel. That is why checkpoint officials were absolutely neurotic when it came to women. Although daimyo from various regions could return to their hometowns, their official wives and heirs were forced to live in Edo as hostages. For the Tokugawa shogunate, as long as these women were still in Edo, the daimyo wouldn't dare rebel. Conversely, if a lord's wife suddenly ran away, it meant disaster. The husband is about to revolt. Therefore, the shogunate was extremely paranoid about women leaving Edo. They would rather mistakenly kill 100 than let one go. Whether you were a daimyo's princess or an ordinary vegetable vendor, as long as you were a biological female, you received the highest level of inspection when passing a checkpoint. So, now you know exactly why the official at the checkpoint gate is glaring at you. In his eyes, you aren't just an innocent tourist wanting to see Mount Fuji. You are a potential runaway hostage who could trigger a nationwide war. But knowing why the shogunate was so strict doesn't make the actual crossing any easier. You are still standing in front of Sekisho, and the crown is still waiting for you. Next episode, we are going to step inside the dark inspection room. We will meet the legendary inspection crown and uncover the terrifying reality of Edo-era strip searches. But what happens if the mole on your face doesn't match your ID? And what drove some desperate woman to hire smugglers in the dead of night? Before we wrap up, I want to specifically let everyone know that the content of every single episode of the Edo Lady Traveler's Guide is the crystallization of my hard work, painstakingly researched by reading a massive amount of specialized books, academy papers, and Asian documents by Japanese scholars. I hope to pass on the warmth of this history to you in the most relaxing way possible. If you like the stories I've put together, please subscribe to the Edo Lady Traveler's Guide. Leave a 5-star review and share the show with even more friends. This is the greatest encouragement in the world for an Edo storyteller like me. I'm your Edo Storyteller, and I will see you next time. Bye!